Okay, in this lesson we're going to be talking about finding percents of numbers using mental math. Because there's going to be a lot of times when you're in a restaurant or in a retail store where you have to figure out a percentage in your head without using a calculator. So the biggest percentages we should know obviously are 100%, which is the whole, 50%, which is half. These are percentages you should definitely know. The percentages that we're going to talk about are the percentages that are really going to help us find all of the other percentages. 10% and 1%. How you find 10% is you move your decimal one time to the left. For 1%, we're going to move the decimal 2 times to the left. For example, 10% of $60. First thing we have to know is that 100% is $60. What's 50%? 50% is half of $60. So 50% would be $30. So we know it's going to be less than $30. So let's move the decimal one time to the left. So 10% is $6. If 10% is $6, what would 5% be? 5% is half of 10%. So what's half of 6? $3. $1% of $100. 1% of $100 is a very small percentage. We're moving the decimal over 2 spots. 1% of $100 is $1. If I want to know 7%, if I know 1%, all I have to do is multiply by 7, which would be $7. So if I know how to find 10% and 1%, I should be able to figure out any other percentage in my head. We're just going to do a couple examples. Let's first find 20% of $80. And we'll do this in our head. I'll write it down so you guys can see it. First thing I want to do, what's 10% of $80? Move the decimal over once. 10% is $8. So if 10% is $8, to find 20%, 20% is just double 10%. So double 8, $16. That's it. What if I want to find 15% of, let's say, $60? So again, find 10%. 10% of 60, move the decimal once, is $6. Well, you have to find 15%, so you need an extra 5%. So 5% is half of 10, so you take half of 6, which is 3. 10% plus 5% is 15%. 6 plus 3 is 9. And that's how you would find your 15%. What if I have to find 9% of $100? You could say, well, 10% of $100, move the decimal once, is $10. But you need 9%, so you have too much. So let's find 1%. 1%, move the decimal 2 spots over, is $1. 10% minus 1%, make sure 9%. 10 minus 1, $9. So here in this example, you were using 10% and 1%. Let's say we're going to find 12% of $60. What's 10%? Actually, let's change that $60 since we just used it up there. Let's make it $120. So 10% of $120 is $12. Again, all you do is move the decimal over one time. So we need an extra 2%. So find 1%. 1%, move the decimal over twice, is $1.20. Remember, we're talking about money, so we should be able to read it properly. So if 1% is $1.20, another 1% is another $1.20. Add them all together, because 10 plus 1 plus 1 make your 12%. Would be $14.40. So as you can tell, we could use 10% and 1% to find any percentage we want, and we could do this in our head by moving the decimal one spot to find 10% and moving the decimal 2 spots to find 1%. Okay, so hopefully you wrote down all of your notes. Now you can go ahead and write your summary and answer or ask any questions that you may have on finding a percent of a number and using mental math to do so.